Hey everyone, RJ Productions here. Today we are back at Elite Jet Solutions with my guy Ray here, and we're gonna talk about these bikes together. Like I told you before, we separated, we didn't see each other. We made notes on basically doing a video on the pros and the cons, or the loves and the hates for these bikes right here, the 2023 and a half CVOs, which is also similar to the 24 Road Glides. So anyway, we did that. Now we're going to actually come together, kind of compare our notes, talk about, see what the differences was on the likes and the dislikes, and just talk to you a little bit, have a discussion about our different perspectives from the bike. So let's get started. So number one for me on the things that I liked on the bike, my number one thing, and this was kind of hard, but it was probably still the one thing that I feel like was kind of head and shoulders over the rest, but it still was very close. But the biggest thing that for me, my pro, was the suspension, the handling, kind of the bars. A lot of things encompass that. So that's why I put it as the number one. And you'll see a lot of my other things kind of bleed into it. Like, so what for you? What was your number one thing that you love about this bike?
Yeah. So for my number one, I was looking at the performance side on the modes.
Okay.
So basically, having the opportunity with the tech and the performance of the bike, but being able to deep dive into the tech side, to be able to change the modes inside the bike, I thought that was like the top for me, on the top of the list, because coming out of aviation, being in aviation, coming out of looking at electronics and all that stuff, that was really a top for me to be able to have like something to tinker with and change some modes. So number one for me was going to hit on the modes.
On the modes, and that makes sense because actually, we've had these bikes, both of us now, a little bit over a year, and Ray got his first, and then I got mine probably, I don't know, maybe a month later, somewhere around a month or 2 months. But anyway, and then Ray had went in and tinkered with all his modes, and so for you guys that don't know, and I'm sure Ray mentioned in his video, but you can actually go in and customize the modes. Like, basically, you can add your engine braking, your throttle response, a couple other things that you can actually adjust in that mode to kind of customize it. So Ray went in right away and started doing all of that. I've had my bike for probably over almost a year before you helped me go in and customize my mode. So I just literally probably just a month ago, I just tinkered with my modes on mine. So that totally makes sense now that I think about all that. Well, for me, I think because the reason, when you go from me being on the street glide to this bike, one, with the weight distribution and the way that the handlebars are set up and the handling and maneuver, the way the bikes feel so much lighter, and it's so much more the ergonomics. I mean, they're not that much different, but I feel like I got just a little bit more room as far as on the seat with the stock seat, the way it's set up. And it just, man, when I hop, I've changed a lot of things on this street glide. Got it dialed in to where I really enjoyed it. But I rode this street glide over here, and then I went back and got my bike, and the road glide, the CVO, is so much more comfortable. I feel so much at home when I'm on that bike. So that's why I say that handling, the suspension, it just, man, it's second to none. I mean, as far as Harleys are set up.
Yes.
And so then what I just said kind of falls into my number two, the weight distribution, right? The change in the weight distribution, how they took some of the weight up top. I think it was like 7.5 pounds of wiring alone that they were able to bring down lower or either lighten it up to make these bikes feel a lot lighter than they actually are. I believe the difference between this Road Glide and the old one, I think it's only like 35 or 40 pounds, somewhere right there.
Right.
But it actually feels like a lot lighter.
Right.
And so that was the other thing, which again, I'm sure that contributes to the handling of the bike. And so it kind of goes into all those things. So what was your number two?
So my number two was on the suspension. So
okay, all right, so close, yeah.
So suspension was, at the top of the list. It was number two.
Okay.
So, and my most thing that I like about it is that you're able to have the adjustability in the rear side of the suspension.
Yes.
Right, because obviously, Ron, like you were saying, comes from a street glide. My first Harley was actually a Heritage Softail. So a Heritage Softail is already a light bike,
right?
But it still has a little bit of weight, but nothing like a street glide with that fixed fairing and stuff. So with coming from a Heritage Softail, getting onto this bike was a big change for me to begin with. Just being a bigger bike and fairing and all this stuff and trying to get used to it.
Yeah.
But the suspension was number 2 just because of the point where you're able to make the adjustabilities for you and the passenger, and then being able to change it with the luggage, right? Because we were wanting to go and do traveling and touring. So number 2, really, definitely. I mean, it was spot on. So it's close.
So it's close. So we're close.
Yeah.
So I would say, okay, so you guys know with the Heritage, you really didn't have to do a lot of change in suspension, right? Because you didn't usually use the bags that much. You didn't ride a passenger that much back then.
Right.
And so there wasn't a lot of changing that you needed to do. So, but I will tell you this, coming from the Street Glide, which had the old suspension for the touring, you could make the adjustments, but it really didn't do much.
Right.
And then, of course, on your regular Street Glide or your regular Road Glide, it came with the 12-inch shocks versus the 13. That really gave you a lot less play or room, and so you bottom out a lot faster, whereas these got the 13. So that's one of the things I would say, like, again, it kind of made it better. And then, like, on these bikes, compared to the other bike with the stock suspension, when you make adjustments on these bikes, you really feel the adjustment.
Right.
It makes a big difference. I mean, like I said, I got Olin's on this bike. I love it. It was a while before I did it, but it hands down one of the best upgrades that I've done on the bike, maybe other than the cam and all of that. But I will say that on this bike right here, you got 2 adjustable spots, right? You can adjust it on the side down here, and then you can adjust it when you take your bag off and do the adjustments. And so right now, I don't even feel like I really need to go to an Olin's or a Fox or Legends or anything, because I feel like the suspension, it performs well enough that, I don't know how much of a difference it'll make. And I'm sure it's going to make some difference, and it may be something that we talk about, we still may end up changing. But I'm saying you can actually do a bunch of other things to this bike before you do the suspension, because the suspension is that much of an upgrade over the previous models.
Right. And there are some minor adjustabilities between the softness and the hardness on the bottom of the shock. And it allows you to, it's a little bit of work, right? Because you've got to make a couple of adjustments and go ride, and then see if that made the change in the softness or hardness. And then if it didn't, you got to go back and continue to make those adjustments. So where some of the, the aftermarket products, those adjustabilities can be done at the top side, right? Because a lot of them have the piggybacks and stuff like that. So, but it's, for us, I mean, we enjoy working with the bikes, tinkering with the bike. So being able to go in and still make those adjustments is really great.
No, it definitely is really great. And I would say this is like, because Ray probably tinkers with things a little bit more than I do. Once I find a good spot, I try to stay in it. But on the old bikes, obviously, the only way to change it was to take the bags off at the stock. Whereas with this one, you can actually dial in, and Harley has a thing you can look up your weight and find out kind of where you need to be exactly. And then from there, you can adjust it just a little bit to your liking. But also the little knob that's on the side, you can adjust that. And for me, what I find is that when I'm riding on a trip with my wife versus riding by myself, I don't even really have to mess with the one where I take the bags off. I just turn that knob on the side and tighten it up a little bit, and that gives me enough for when it's us riding, versus when she's not, then I loosen it up. So, I mean, I like that because it's been very convenient for me to adjust my suspension based on, whether she's riding or not.
Yep. Yeah, sure.
So I'll go to number 3. So number 3 for me was your number 1. The power, the performance, the VVT, the 121, the modes, all of those things, and I think for me, the reason that this was number 3 versus a number 1 was that with the old bikes, whether you had the 114 or the 117, you could go in, put your cams in, put your tune in, performance, and get performance out of the bike. So, that's why I think it maybe wasn't like number 1, but it is one of my top 3 because the VVT.
Right.
That's the main reason it's the top 3 for me. So you guys are seeing the video that I did. The reason that the VVT, don't get me wrong, the CVO ST is amazing. It's an amazing bike. And I mean, when you're looking at whether you're going to get one or the other, it's hard to choose on that because, and I'll tell you why. And I'll tell you guys, just for you guys that may be thinking about all of this and you're trying to undecided, if you go with the CVO ST, and you can change the cams. You can do all the performance things right now. They got cams that are already, but you're gonna get straight performance, and it's great. But if you're like me, where I love performance, I love to go fast. But there's times where I don't want to be on all the time. I don't want the herky jerky. Sometimes I just want to cruise and just take it easy and look at the sights and see. And the one thing about the VVT, it allows you to do that. You can be in fifth gear going 70, 80 miles an hour, slow down to maybe 40 miles an hour, and then throttle and never change out of fifth gear.
Right.
I mean, and the bike never starts to go dead and starts to jerk on you. That's what happens with the other bikes, is that if you get up to like 70, 80 miles an hour and then you let it go down to like 40, you got to downshift and shift to catch it back up. Otherwise, you got to go dead, or it's going to be puttering out on you and all that. You don't have that with the VVT. It's just smooth. It's almost like it switches to an automatic. And I mean, and the thing is, the other thing, the modes, right? So you can actually program the modes to where it will do like the old bikes, right? Yes. But you can change your throttle response rate, and it's all smooth. And so I love that about the VVT, the fact that you can adjust it. You can actually have two different modes. You could be on that power performance sport mode situation, or then you can switch it back to a mode where you're just cruising and chilling. And man, I mean, you got your music going and you just gliding and you looking, man. That's why I love it. That's number 3, the VVT. That's why I'm not looking to take my VVT off, even though I see a lot of guys doing it to get more performance.
Right. And I love what he says about being able to go from sport mode to being able to go to, just back to regular mode. Because it's one of those situations when you're in sport mode and you're riding with the wives, and they give you that subtle, clinch or punch in the side, like, you're hitting the curves too fast or whatever. Yeah. Then you can switch it out to sport mode, go back into the, the road mode, or if we want to call it wife mode.
I like that wife mode.
So for my number 3 was VVT performance.
Okay, got it. Okay.
Yeah, so I hit a little bit on the VVT performance. Ron he basically nailed everything where I was going to go. It's just phenomenal. The technology behind it. Obviously, we've seen VVT in vehicles for years. Right. So coming into the motorcycle side, I'm sure it's probably been in some other motorcycles, but for Harley to be able to bring it in and bring the technology into it was super good. Just great performance. I mean, like Ron said, you could be in 4th gear, 5th gear. You can let it, throttle down, get down below the RPMs, and it just picks back up. It's smooth. It just is a great performance for the VVT. Yeah. So,
and then for you guys that don't know, Ray and I both, we have about 14,000. I have 14,100 something. He has like almost 14,000 on his. So we've had these bikes years. We've been riding them. I know a lot of guys like, I don't want that VVT. That totally understand. That's why they got the CVO ST, so you don't have to get it. But I like to tell everybody my favorite word is both. BOAF. Both. So that's why I still got the Street Glide, because I can put that performance in there and have that if I want. But when I'm out of town and cruising with my wife and I just want to, kind of make it easy, or make it smooth, and still have performance, this bike kind of encompasses it all. And so that's why I'm sticking with this. But, who knows? Maybe one day we'll have this and have the CVO ST. I don't know. We'll see. That's yet to come. But even the 117, the new 24s, I've been thinking about those. That'll be cool to build one of those to really do everything that you wanted to do in it.
Yes.
So, see a lot of guys switching to the 135 too. That's kind of crazy. I see guys take these CVOs, take the motor out, and put a 135 in, which is crazy.
Yes, that is totally true.
Yeah. But the other thing, guys, we're going to probably get into is that the tuning, the ECU situation. But I'm seeing multiple guys take these bikes and change out little things and getting 170 horsepower, 170 torque. That's crazy, man, for these bikes. So,
And not having to do a bunch more stuff to the bike, right? Like head replacements.
Right.
Lifters, going into the upper side of the engine. So having the capabilities, right, because, we're putting a lot of money in just buying the bike, right, in general. And then if you're having to go in and invest on the upper end. Mm-hmm. So these bikes are phenomenal because you have an opportunity to be able to get a bike that you can put invest a little bit of money in
Right.
and get performance out of it that some of these other guys are probably putting 15, 20 additional K into their bikes.
Right.
And, and you're just probably only doing about 5K and you're still able to keep up with them and which is super good.
No, it's super good. I mean, yeah, I think with the king of the bagger situation, I think that's definitely helped Harley put a lot more performance into the bikes, and hopefully we'll keep seeing that from years to come now.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, number 4, we're going to talk about. So for me, my number 4, and this was tough because I would probably say before I knew a lot about what truly was going to be into the bike. So I started looking at this as soon as I knew that there were going to be a change, and they hinted at it. I started researching, just waiting. But probably the number one reason why I decided to go ahead and do this, because I got this when I bought the Street Glide. It was a tough Street Glide, Road Glide, Street Glide, Road Glide. They were right there. Really, the only reason I went with the Street Glide is because years previous I had always wanted the Street Glide, but then the Road Glide started really coming up, making those changes and looking good. So I was liking them both. So it was a tough decision. And so I knew eventually I wanted a Road Glide. And then when I heard that they were coming out with this new bike, the number 4 thing for me was the styling. The styling of the bike, the way it looks, I mean, it is just amazing. Looking at these bikes, it's one of those things that the old Road Glides were so awesome. It's such a beautiful bike to actually customize and do things on. When they said they were coming out with the new bikes, it was kind of one of those things, okay, are they going to mess it up, or is it going to still be good? How can they improve upon it, make sure it's better, they don't miss on it?
Right.
And I will say, man, I still love the old bikes. I really do. But they did not miss on this, to me, and the styling and the way it looks.
I would agree.
Yeah.
The styling is perfect. I mean, I know of several people, throughout the motorcycle world, they talked about, it looks like an Indian and this and that, and I'm like, I don't even see an Indian out
Not
of
at
that.
all. Not at all.
I mean, as many times as I looked at the bike, and I guess the more I looked at the bike, the more I fell in love with it.
Right.
And the style and just everything about it. The aerodynamics behind it, right?
Yes.
The tech they put into that. So there's so much stuff in the way it looks that is phenomenal. I mean, it just.
I mean, you're right. You hit it right on, and the way that it looks to me, it doesn't look like an Indian. Indian has its own look. I mean, Indians they're nice, but they're not as nice as this.
Yes, yeah.
I mean, the way they did that light with the wings.
This is
like,
more beefier.
It's got the muscle, but it's got the smoothness, the elegance with it. It's just, man, it's just really a neat. And the finishes are so much on the higher end than you will get in the Indian.
Right.
I mean, you can look at an Indian far off and you'd be like, man, the Indian looks super nice. But you get up on the Indian and a Harley, you're gonna see the finish out on the bikes that the Harley is just a lot more upgraded. The screws to the bolts, all those things to the plastic pieces, the way that they look, it's gonna look a whole much more polished and refined on a Harley, which is why, because I looked at it, even before this, I looked and tried to debate because I thought about going to an Indian also. And the other thing, the big thing for me, the huge one, why I wouldn't buy an Indian over this is the screen.
Right.
Especially right now, Indian may come out next year. They may change it. I hope they change it because that screen is like way behind now.
Right.
Because we have a friend that got an Indian, and man, it's a nice looking bike. Don't get me wrong, I love his Indian. But when you look at the screen, it's just, this screen is like, it's a killer, man. It's awesome. Now, you don't like tech stuff, maybe you don't like it, but when I get on my Street Glide, which I thought was a nice screen, when I get on that now, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's so small, it's so tiny. But now this one, I mean, it's just a monster of a screen, and we got a buddy at our church that gives us a hard time talking about, you got that Harley laptop? No, what do you call it? iPad?
iPad.
Yeah, I'm like, hey, you know what? I love my iPad, man. It's sweet.
Of course, he comes from a 1941 Panhead, right?
Got you.
He's super nostalgic.
Everything old school, which is fine. I mean, I love the old school too, and I love the way it looks. But I'm telling you, I'm not going to kick some technology out of bed at all. I love some technology, and so these bikes are filled with it. And we're going to get into a couple of things that maybe I don't like about it here in just a little bit. But yeah. So what was your number 4?
So my number 4 was at the beginning when the bikes were first developed. Obviously, there wasn't a lot of stuff out for the bikes, right? We had just basic air filters that we could buy. There was just, you were just scratching and clawing just to get a tour pack to be able to go, on a trip and to do something to the bike. Yeah. So, but my number 4 was going to be, Harley actually came out with a windscreen that we were able to purchase.
Oh yeah.
So, putting the 10-inch windscreen on there that Harley had developed to go with it was phenomenal.
It was. It really was.
It was such a great windscreen. Now, the negative for that screen was that it was a clear color.
Right.
Right. So it kind of looked oldish, like old manish.
Yes.
So it didn't really have like that hip vibe. It didn't really go with the nostalgics of, like Ron says, about the style of the bike.
Yes.
But the windscreen actually performed. And it performed not only for me, but it also performed for my wife as well as a passenger.
Right.
It just, she'd never had any wind buffering on her helmet. It was just a great windscreen altogether. So that was like my number 4 was, I was just super excited that they had developed a windscreen
early on
when the bike was first developed. So, and then, obviously more windscreens have come out. Like I had previously mentioned, Ron did a super great video about the windscreens and the pros and cons between the ones that he's purchased, which is pretty much all of them other than...
Yeah, most of all of them.
Yeah.
And then I've tried your 13.5-inch by Clockworks. The only one that I really hadn't tried, and we'll actually have a video coming out soon on that, is we'll talk about it, but Ray has the new, what is it?
10-inch?
10-inch by Clockworks.
Yep.
So that's the only one I really hadn't reviewed, but man, Ray says it's awesome.
Yeah.
And so performs just as well almost as the 13.5-inch that he has, but it looks a lot better. A whole lot better. Yeah. I mean, that's awesome, man. I mean, that, if for you guys that don't know, that Harley windscreen that came out, like Ray got it first. And when he got it, I was like, it looks all right, but I don't know if I want to do it. I was trying to hang on. I actually went and bought the little 4.5-inch that Harley made.
Yep.
And I was like, I'm just going to try it. I know it's probably not going to work, but I'm going to try it because it looks cool. And it was a little bit better than stock, but it wasn't enough. So then I finally broke down and went and bought the one that Ray had because I rode his bike. And I was like, oh, man, you can hear your music better. Yeah. It's so much more comfortable. So I bought it. And actually, I really fell in love with it other than the fact that it was clear. And I know some guys painted them black. Some guys tried to do 10 on them. But
I tried to.
He tried it too.
I tried to put some black film on it. I watched a video of it. I got about a quarter of the way through it, and I was like, "This thing's gonna stay clear."
Exactly.
Just left it clear.
All right. So so number 5 for me. Number 5 is and it's gonna go back probably to a lot of other things, but it's the comfort. This bike is so comfortable. I mean, and one of the things, so I'm gonna go ahead and talk about this because one of the things that I wanted to put in that were kind of right there close to being in my top 5 was the bars, and then the other one was the infotainment center. We'll touch a little bit on that in a little bit, but to me, when you talk about the comfort of the bike, it has to do with the suspension, the weight, the bars, the adjustability that you had on the bike. So all of those things kind of come into comfort. Now the seat was not comfortable out of the box at all. But as you got like maybe 3,500 miles on it, it got a little more comfortable. But the ergonomics of the bike, all of those things, the boards, all of those things really made the bike very comfortable. And then once I got in there and we took the little tab and I adjust my bars up, a lot of people were looking at my handlebars thinking, man, are those aftermarket? Where'd you get those? I'm like, no, these are stock bars. I just adjusted them for me. When I got that adjustment on there, I remember we were going through it and trying to find that right spot. But once I found that spot, man, this thing is so comfortable, so fun to ride. I mean, it's so smooth. And I've gone out of town for anywhere from a 4 to a 12-day trip where I'm on nothing but the bike that whole time. And I come back and I tell people my body feels better now that I'm back in. I've been on the bike for 9 days than when I'm in town sleeping in my own bed and doing all these things. Now, a lot of that's because I do a lot of weight training and things like that when I'm home, so I'm always a little sore. But I think the time from taking a break from weight training and the vibration of the bike and the smoothness, I don't know, but I never really have an issue with being comfortable on this bike.
Yep.
The only thing that I would say that even remotely will get me uncomfortable on this bike after a long ride, all day riding, is that if I hadn't, been riding that much and I get on the bike, my butt gets a little bit, got to get used to being on the seat a little bit because I'll get a little soreness from the seat, but not much. But that's usually the first couple of days. And then after that, I'm fine. It's just my body getting back used to being on that seat for 8-9 hours a day.
Yep.
Because I mean, when we out of town, we spend about 8 to 9 hours on these bikes each day.
Easy.
So what about you?
So my number 5 was fuel efficiency.
Oh yeah,
So,
that's a good one.
I mean, just obviously we talk about the performance, we talk about a lot of the stuff, comfortability, stuff like that. But we also, I mean, it's just phenomenal how well the bike does with the bigger engine in it,
right?
With the VVT, with all the mode settings, being able to change them, all that stuff factored in.
Right.
The bike still performs very, very well on the fuel side.
Yes.
And it was and of course, we're not the type of guys to be looking at, the fuel's $1 cheaper here or 50 cents cheaper here. We're not that way. But when you're looking at bikes as a performance,
right,
and the fuel is very good,
right,
it's just mind-boggling
So
how that all comes together, and you're still getting great fuel efficiency out of the bike.
right.
I mean, and Ron even, he had said earlier that he spent probably 8 or 9 months before he even started tinkering with the mode settings, where I had done mine early on. When we would go on big trips, he would want to pull over to get fuel, and I'm like, I got another 100 miles, bro.
That is 100% true. That's so crazy. And I remember when you changed it, and I don't know where I was going up to Carrollton, up to Maverick, and it's about a 40-minute drive. And I was telling him, I was like, dude, my gas is not like it. I gained gas, like mileage on my gas tank coming from my house to Maverick after we did the change. And that's when we added more throttle response and engine braking. So I'm thinking I'm going to lose some fuel efficiency. I actually gained fuel efficiency. And I was like, man, that's crazy. So, man, I mean, like he said, I mean, I don't want to like just throw money away on gas. I mean, but, when you're doing with a performance bike, it's not one of the beginning things in your mind.
Right.
Unless your name is Brandon. If your name is Brandon, hey, it might be a thing that's on the forefront of your mind, South Carolina. Sorry, a little jab at one of my boys.
That's awesome.
But anyway, it's not a joke. But no, I'm not, on my performance bike, I'm not really worried about it. But it's nice when you're on a trip, you don't have to stop at the gas station, so you can really get some miles under your belt before you have to stop for fuel. So that's true. So did you have any like honorable mentions, things like that where you felt like you wanted to get on the top 5, but it was close or anything?
No, not really. I think I really focused on what I thought was super positive.
Right.
Without pulling the negatives into the.
That's true.
Because it's super hard because as you're telling about a positive, you want to, throw in the negative as well, right?
Yeah.
So I think out of the top 5, those were like true positives where I couldn't find anything to gripe about.
Right.
On those positives.
That's a good point.
Right. So it wasn't like I, just said, oh, well, it's a positive, but, I don't really know if it's good.
That's a good point. And that's probably why the infotainment center, like it was an honorable mention for me.
Right.
Because I wanted to put it in a positive because I love the way it looks and the layout. I mean, it's got so many features about it. That's awesome.
But you had a negative.
But I have a negative for it. I have a complaint.
Yeah.
But so when I look at my top 5, right, suspension and handling, I really don't have any negative things on that. The weight distribution, that's always a problem. Anytime you can lose weight or even not lose weight but look like you lost weight, you know what I mean? Well, come on, guys, I can take that. So that's a positive. No negatives on there. And then the other one, the performance, really no negative to the performance.
Right.
When you talk about the comfort, really no negative to the comfort other than maybe the seat, and that's why maybe it was number 5.
Well, Ron's a trooper, and I don't even think he's even giving y'all any insight on to how long he rocked that stock seat. And I mean, he rocked it for almost a full year, and we would go on some long trips, even with my new seat with the gel coating and all this stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm like, man, my butt hurts. And Ron's like, huh? And I'm like, how are you still riding on I rode that seat. I bought the bike out of Houston. I rode that brand new seat from Houston to Dallas Fort Worth, and I was ready to get rid of it. I didn't want to have anything to do with it. But he was trooping it.
Well, what he fails to mention is that part of that reason is his fault because, so anyway, it's a long story, but my bike was on order and it was taking forever to get here, and we had a trip planned for Bike and Blues and Barbecue, and literally we're probably like maybe 2 weeks from the trip, and my bike still hasn't come, and I'm just like, well, I guess I'm just not going to even worry about it. I'm just going to drop my bike and don't even worry about it. And then it was probably maybe a week, maybe 5 days before the trip, my bike came, and there was no time to do anything to the bike other than slip-ons.
Yeah.
And so that was the only thing I really got to do to the bike. And then I was like, you know what? I'm just going to take my old bike. I already got it customized for me and all of these things. And I was like, I'll just take my bike. And him and my wife were like, no, you got a new bike. You got to take the bike. You got to take the bike. And I was serious. I was going to leave it because I was like, I was already mad because it came late and didn't have time to make all these adjustments. I needed to get the bars. I needed to get the exhaust. I wanted the seat, and I knew that seat was going to be hard. And I was like, whatever. All right, I'll take it. So I'm telling you, it was that first 2,500 miles were tough.
Yeah, but he never complained. He never complained. He just rocked through.
Yes.
I mean, just kept pressing. Even though he's probably super mad at me and his wife, he eventually just, hard seat to ride on.
I remember when we were on our way to Arkansas, like at one point I was sitting on the back seat just to try to change something because the regular seat was fine. I just sat up on the back seat, stood up, and like kind of rode for a while on the highway just because my butt was killing me.
No backrest.
No backrest. Yes, no backrest. And then what's so crazy, we went out of town 3,700 miles. That's what I put on that bike while we were going on that trip. So, yeah.
No problem anytime.
All right, guys. RJ out. We'll see you on the next video.